Libby, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I really enjoyed your book. You sent it to me. Um, let's see, I received it Sunday, and today's Wednesday. Today's Wednesday. Yeah, received it Sunday. Today's Wednesday, and I finished it yesterday.
Oh
So,
wow, I'm impressed. I'm a very slow reader, so there's no way I would have gotten through that book that fast.
oh, I tore it up. It was no effort to. I mean, I was determined to read the whole thing anyway before the interview, but it was actually no effort at all. I was engrossed. It was a very good book. I was impressed.
Oh, thank
And
you.
I read a lot, so, I read a lot of classics, I read a lot of literature, and I really enjoyed it, absolutely
Well,
did.
thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Thank you so much.
That was October in the Earth, for the listeners, have is that how long has that been out? That's new, isn't it?
Yeah, it just came out on October 10th, so just a couple of weeks
What?
here.
October 10th?
Yeah.
That's my birthday.
What? Happy birthday!
Yeah, yeah, October 10th.
All
Um,
right.
that's quite a coincidence,
Yes.
if I was a numerologist, I'd be very suspicious right now, in a good way, but I'm not. I'm not really suspicious. I'm not really, not suspicious. What's the word I'm looking for?
Superstitious?
Superstitious.
Yeah.
Yes. I wonder if they're related, superstitious and suspicious.
I don't know. A lot of people ask me like what's my sign? Because I'm a little woo and a little weird, but I'm really not into astrology. So people are always asking me like, "What's your sign?" And I'm always like, "I mean, it's Taurus, but I nothing about me lines up with being a Taurus except for the fact that I don't want to move. I constantly indulge in all of my sensual pleasures, and I am obsessed with weed. So I guess I kind of the most Taurian person of all time for someone who does not believe in astrology.
I don't. Yeah, I have a science education, and astrology's based on the planets revolving around the Earth. I believe, and so I give it no credence whatsoever. And then I'm a Libra, which is supposed to be the scales and balanced, and there's my life is totally one extreme to the next. It's never balanced.
Yeah, it's not my bag.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we agree on that. All right. So when you were young, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A writer.
No way.
Way. I mean, I think I started out when I was really young. I kind of wanted to be like a veterinarian because I always have loved animals. I still do. But yeah, when I was 8 years old, I read Watership Down for the first time and it was all over like instantly. As soon as I finished reading that book, or maybe when I was like partway through it, I was like, wait a minute, somebody paid this guy to write this book. That's what I'm gonna do. And I just like it was never even like I want to be a writer. It was just like I'm going to be a writer. That was the way it
Wow.
was from that point on.
And how old were you at the time?
I was 8.
8.
Yeah.
Wow. So you read Watership Down at 8. I'm trying to think how old my first adult book was The Hobbit.
Oh, I love The Hobbit.
I think I was older than 8 though, so you got me. I think you got me beat there. And I think it took me a year to read it.
No shame in that. It's a pretty dense book. Tolkien was even when he was trying to like The Hobbit, he was kind of trying to write for a younger audience initially, and he was softening it a little bit, but like he still is a dense, chewy writer. It's a lot to get through.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. Yeah, I read all of those books, over the course of the next few years, whatever age I was. But yeah, I don't remember them as being like very simple. They weren't simply written. They were adult sentences in a young
Oh
guy's
yeah.
mind. But
Yeah,
they certainly
definitely.
took me somewhere else. What an amazing journey that was, The Hobbit. I mean,
Oh yeah.
when I read as an adult, I go on a journey wherever wherever the author takes me, but at that age, even more so.
Yeah, Tolkien definitely like blows your mind open when you're young. You don't even
Yeah.
realize words can do that. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so you've been writing. Did you start writing at that age?
I mean, I wrote stories and stuff when I was a kid. I apparently I entered a few of them into some kind of contest. I don't really remember doing this, but like recently, my sister found this terrible manuscript I wrote when I was, I don't know, maybe 11, and it won some kind of like school district award. So I was writing stuff, but I mean, it wasn't good. I was a kid.
Well, sure. I
I'm
mean,
sure it
by
was
our
good for
standards
a
now.
kid.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
was
I've
not
read
great. It was all. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've read some works written by kids, and it's very obvious they're written by children. Yeah, it's kind of amazing how much better we get at it as we get older.
Yeah, I mean, like there are a few very young writers out there who just completely blow your mind. Like Amanda Gorman is incredible. Like at age 21, she was already better than most poets who've ever lived, right? So she
Mhm.
was probably great when she was a young kid, but like most of us are not.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. All right, so can you describe your writing education? How did you teach yourself to write, or did you go to school for it, or if you read books about writing?
Yeah, I laugh whenever somebody says, "Tell me about your education." None. I didn't go to college. I wanted to, but I couldn't afford it, and I was like, I'm not gonna go into debt to be a writer because, like, famously, writers don't make money, so I'll never pay that back. So I just
Yeah.
decided I was going to, yeah, I was just gonna self-educate, and I'm very, very fortunate. Had a lucky alignment of events in my life because I was born into a family of professional artists. So my dad, my grandpa were both professional painters. Like they made all their living and supported their families from painting. Several of my uncles are professional artists. My sister is now an artist. So like everyone in my family was just like art careers. And so when I announced at age 8, I'm going to be a writer someday, no one in my life was like, well, that's not very practical. You should have a backup plan. You should do this and that instead. And then you can write on the side. They were all just like, great, go be a writer. So I just started learning by myself from an early age because, you know, like I said, I had that example of self-educated, successful artists in my own life. So I grew up with the mess like you don't need to go to college to learn how to do arts. It's cool if you can, like that's fun. It's fun to get to study art intensively for 4 years or 8 years or whatever. But it's not necessary to build the career. So I just started writing after high school. I really got serious about it. Well, I got more serious about it in my late 20s. I was kind of noodling around early on and then figured out the direction I was going in when I was about 28 years old. And I just did it myself. I wrote a ton, I read a ton. I had a critique group that I went to every Thursday for like 15 years. And I just immersed myself in it, and that was pretty much it.
How helpful was the critique group?
Oh, extremely helpful. And what was interesting is that I write fiction for a living. But the critique group was focused on poetry. It was all about poetry. So
Huh,
we were doing this completely different style of writing. But why it was the reason why it was so valuable is because poetry really teaches you. Poetry is about saying more than one thing with a single set of words, right? So it teaches you to be very selective and very image driven in what you write so that you are able to convey multiple messages with an economy of words, which is incredibly helpful for a novelist, as it turns out. Even a novelist like me who tends to write long, you read October in the Earth, which is actually my shortest book to date, which is a
oh, yeah?
100,000 words. So most of my books are significantly longer than that. I kind of write door stoppers. So even given the fact that I write door stoppers, I found an intensive study of poetry to be very, very helpful to me professionally because it taught me how to drill down and focus on what was most important and how to use imagery to tell a story rather than using narrative to tell a story.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like poetry is kind of the ultimate in writing. You pack the ultimate meaning and emotion into the fewest amount of words.
Yeah,
The most powerful form of writing. Um,
yeah,
at least for people who can read it and appreciate it. It's not
yeah.
the form that gets around the most.
Yeah, that's true. It's definitely not lucrative, unfortunately.
Yeah, right. But I think if you can write poetry, then that finds its way into your books a little
Oh,
bit.
definitely. And
And
I
if
still write poetry just for the pleasure of writing poetry too, even though I don't publish it, but I write poetry all the time. So yeah.
yeah, I'm sure it affects I'm sure it affects in a positive way your prose. Do you feel that way?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I think my readers have noticed that too and have remarked on that sometimes in reviews. Like when I go to sometimes I do writers groups and people will or clubs. Like I'll do Zoom meetings where book clubs have read my books or whatever. In fact, I have one later this evening that I'll be
Cool.
joining a Zoom call for.
Oh, how much
And
fun
yeah,
that must be great fun.
It is really, really fun. I love it a lot. But yeah, people frequently ask me like, "Oh, your writing is so poetic. Did you study poetry in college or whatever?" So then I go into my whole poetry spiel. So yeah, it does. I do think it comes through in my writing that I have an appreciation for poetry for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, I every now and then I get on a kick where I write poetry, and, you know, 1 out of 20 or 30 of them is I think is worthwhile and finds its way into one of my nonfiction books, but boy, it's tough. It's probably the hardest thing to do well, I think.
It is very tough, yeah, because you really do have to focus on being super tight with your words. You have to be sparing, and that can be very difficult to effectively convey a message with just a few words. It's very tricky.
Mhm. I was on a kick for a while where I tried to write a poem every day, and I felt like I was having success, and then now that I don't have that, you know, goal, I don't hardly write at all. So how do you write poetry? Do you make yourself do it on a certain schedule, or do you just enjoy it enough that you wanna do it once in a while?
Well, back when I was still with this writers group, since we met every week, I had to do like at least one poem a week for for our critique group. So
Yep.
it was helpful then. Now the group is kind of disbanded. We've all just sort of gone our separate ways in life. And unfortunately, I don't write poetry as often now, but I write it when I feel inspired to. Like when I have an idea that only wants to be a poem, now I'll write it, but I don't make it as regular a practice as I used to. I probably should. I should probably force myself to write a poem a week just to keep my chops up.
Alright, well, maybe we should right now start a once a week poetry critique group that meets on
Yeah,
Zoom. And we've got 2
there you
members
go.
already.
There you go. Let's do it.
Yeah. I need some kind of motivation to, outside motivation. I need to force myself. I need to trick myself into writing. Like, I recently started a newsletter where I said, "If you join my newsletter, you'll get a free short story every month." So now I'm committed to, you know, writing one good short story a month or, you know, good enough to share with the
Yeah, you
people
got to
in my
do it.
newsletter. So, yeah, like these little hacks, you know, these little mind hacks. How do you self-motivate to write in general? Do you have any tricks?
Doing it for a living is a huge motivation because if I don't get paid, and that's a problem. But even before I was doing it for a living, my big motivation was I'm going to do this for a living someday. So like I have to keep doing it if I want to achieve that goal. I knew it wasn't going to happen if I sat around dreaming about it, or screwed around and didn't get serious and do the kind of writing, you know, I needed to do to get me there, but which is kind of how I spent most of my 20s, was just screwing around with um so you know, having that goal of turning it into a career or maintaining a career is very helpful for motivation. I mean, I write every day. Maybe once a month I'll take a single day off because I'm just kind of feeling a
Mm,
little burnt out and I just need to do something else, but I write every single day of my life. So
wow,
yeah.
nice. How many hours a day do you write?
Oh, not many. Like it turns out, unless I'm up against a really tight deadline, which happens occasionally, it turns out to be like 3 or 4 hours tops. So even though I am writing every day, I'm also not
Mm,
even doing like a full-time job's worth of writing every
yeah.
day. It is my job, but like it's like 35 hours a week, maybe. So that's nice.
That sounds about average. You know, I listen to a lot of, author interviews, and, that seems like what most of them write, you know, it's a few hours a day, not, you know, 4 or less is what I hear most
Yeah,
of the time.
I find that after I get to 4 hours, I kind of hit a wall, and usually what I produce after that is pretty much crap. There are some
Yeah.
times when I just have conflicting deadlines and I have no choice but to just cram 8 hours of writing into a single day, and it sucks. And I'm usually not very happy with what I produce during those times.
Mhm.
But like honestly, my readers don't really seem to be able to tell the difference. So I guess I'm doing fine. It's just like
Alright.
I feel dissatisfied with it, but I guess it does all right. So whatever.
Yep. Yep. What do you do to get your mind in the right place before you write? Do you have any rituals?
Yeah, I do. I'm a very ritual driven person, to say the least. And I go for long walks every day, every single day. I walk about 8 kilometers. That's about 5 miles for the people in
Whoa.
the States. Yeah. And I listen to music while I do that. Sometimes I'll listen to like an audiobook. I usually don't listen to fiction while I'm writing fiction, which I'm usually writing fiction. So I actually consume very little fiction nowadays, but I listen to a lot of like nonfiction audiobooks, especially by writers who have a really good narrative style. So like Michael Pollan, Mary Roach, Timothy Egan, like anybody who's writing nonfiction in a way that's very story driven and very character focused, I'm very drawn to. So I get into that. I listen to a lot of podcasts that are like of a more creative and storytelling bent. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts that are about writing because again, I feel like like when it becomes your job, you don't want to spend your non-working time doing the thing that's your job or thinking about the thing that's your job. So like I rarely listen to all the podcasts everyone knows about that's about how to write or about how to develop a career as a writer, even though that's kind of my milieu. I'm just like, I don't want to think about it when I'm not doing it. So same thing with fiction, but I listen to a lot of narrative podcasts, just consume story any way I can while I'm walking. And then once I get my head kind of full of that stuff, I come back home, go up to my office, make a cup of tea first, then go up to my office, and then I
Mhm.
write for 4 hours while I sip my tea.
You have a window you're looking out when you're sitting at your desk?
No, sadly, I used to. I just recently moved to Victoria from San Juan Island. My writing desk used to face out on a beautiful view that I could look at. And now I have a view of a white wall, which sucks. So I covered
Huh.
that wall with the covers of old pulp fiction novels. So like old
Oh,
sci-fi
okay.
paperback novels. So
All right. So you
that's my
get some.
wallpaper now.
All right. That's cool.
Yep.
That's cool. You also have a podcast. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I do a podcast. I recently started it. It's been running for about a year. It's called Future Saint of a New Era. And it is about literally whatever I feel like talking about that week. Topics range wildly from memories of my like funny things that have happened to me in the past. I did an entire episode. I used to be a zookeeper, so I did a whole episode that was like my best zookeeping stories. I frequently talk about technology and like the intersection between art and technology. Whatever, like it's literally whatever pops into my head, I will talk about. I did a 3-part series in October that is just like a fictionalization, like a retelling of the weirdest true story I know. It's like this unsolved mystery called the Dodleston Messages from back in the 1980s. And it's just like the most mind-blowing tale I've ever heard. So I did a 3-part series on that. It's just like there is no format to this podcast. It is whatever is stuck to the inside of my brain. I scrape it off and throw it at the internet and see what happens.
All right. How's it going? Have you got a listenership developed?
Yeah, it's going surprisingly well for being so weird and so about nothing. I have quite a group of listeners growing, which is great, and they're all a bunch of weirdos, which I love. I refer to my listeners as curious weirdos, and yeah, it's a nice little tribe of people that's kind of starting to follow my work through the podcast. So that's really cool. I like that.
Good. I think there's probably a whole lot of curious weirdos in this world, so you've got a good niche.
Yeah.
All right, so I think you once declared on Facebook that you were finished as a writer. Why 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 did that happen, and how did you get started again?
Oh God. So you read the author's notes to October in the Earth, obviously,
Oh,
because
I
that's where
read
I
the
told that
whole
story.
book until my Kindle wouldn't go to another page. Yes.
Uh Yeah, so this was back in I guess it was 2013, maybe. I no, it's 2011. My God. I had been working to build my career as a writer. I had just suffered 2 really bad setbacks where I had 2 different agents, and for a year each for each agent, neither one of them could sell any of my books. One because she got 6 rejections from a publisher and then she got discouraged and dropped me as a client. And then the next agent I got just never tried to sell any of my manuscripts I'd written for an entire year. So I dropped her. And I was feeling so discouraged. I was like, this is never going to happen for me. It's never going to come together. Like the odds are just piled up against me. I had just gotten a rejection from like the one small press that I like had a personal connection with. I sent them a manuscript as like a Hail Mary. I was like, please publish this. And they're like, no, we're not going to publish this. And I was like, ah, God. So I just was like, you know what? I need to give up. This is not going to come together. It's not going to happen. And what was really like a big blow to me was, for the past decade, perhaps, I had been on this writing forum with a bunch of writers who were also kind of developing their careers, and like all of them had taken off by then. They all had gotten really good deals. Like their agents had sold their manuscripts like for a lot of money. Everything was going great for all of my writer friends. I was the only one who was like the loser who couldn't get traction anywhere.
Huh.
And I was like, okay, I just gotta stop. Like, this is obviously, I'm not any good at this, and this is not what I should be spending my time on, because it's making me miserable to feel like I can't ever get anywhere. So I dramatically announced on Facebook that I was never going to write again. And like, as soon as I closed my laptop, I kid you not, this is so embarrassing, because my husband like saw my Facebook post and he just kind of looked at me like, shut up, like whatever. And I just felt bad because like he could see that it was obviously not true, that I was never going to write again. But even as I said it, like seconds after posting it, I felt this compulsion to start writing a new book. And I was like, no, no. So I literally went and hid in our closet. This is so embarrassing. But I was like in our closet, crying and sobbing with my laptop, starting a new manuscript. Like moments after I had declared I would never write again. So I did write again instantly.
Nice. Yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like there's no stopping you.
Yeah, apparently not. I genuinely wanted to stop, but I just couldn't. Like, it felt like there was some force outside of me that was like, no, you're going to keep writing. I don't care if you
Yeah.
like it or not, you're going to do it. And I was like, ah, and I was like just crying, like seriously, snot pouring down my face. It was ridiculous. But yeah, it was what it was.
So how did you end up finally getting the right agent and getting published, getting traditionally published?
What's interesting is that I did not get the right agent until after I was already traditionally published and a best-selling author.
Oh,
Like, here's the funny thing. Here's the weird thing about I about it all backwards. So I could not, I still, like, after I went back to writing reluctantly, but forcibly by some outer force, I continued writing manuscripts, and I felt like, fuck, what am I gonna do with these? Like, it's just, it's pointless. And I was like, whatever. Like, some of these stories are pretty good. There was one I particularly liked that I thought was a fun story, and I was like, people will like this, even if it's just a few people, they'll like it. And I want to give this story a chance to find its audience, even if it's just like 10 people in the whole world, whatever. So I self-published this novel I had written that was set in ancient Egypt, and I literally forgot about it. I put it up, I figured out how to make a rudimentary ebook, I put it up on Kindle, and I walked away and forgot it existed and tried to go on with my life. And after, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, I started getting these deposits in my bank account, and they weren't a lot of money. It was like $20 here and then. The next month it was like $60, and the month after that it was 120. And I was like, what is this? Where is this money coming from? I was like, am I going to be implicated in a money laundering scheme? What the hell is
it's
happening?
coming from
And,
a prince in Africa.
right? Yeah, I was really worried because I could not figure this out. And then I was like, oh, that book I self-published. So I went and looked it up on Amazon. Like, I literally had not touched it for months. I went and looked it up on Amazon, and it had a bunch of reviews. Like, a bunch of people had found it and were reading it and really liked it. Like, it had all these good reviews. And I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should just keep self-publishing then. So I self-published like all the other manuscripts I had that were languishing on my computer that my agents could never sell. And I very quickly got to the point, when I had more books out, where my income from self-publishing was replacing what I was making at my day job. So I was like, oh, I can earn a living as a writer suddenly. That's cool. So I waited until I had enough money saved up that I had like a year's worth of expenses in my bank account. And then I quit my day job and I just started writing full time and self-publishing. And around that time, I had a large enough audience, and, enough people were talking, word of mouth, talking about my books and sharing their enjoyment of my books with each other, that my books were pretty consistently landing on like the Amazon top 100 chart for historical fiction. So a few different small presses that publish historical fiction noticed this and approached me and said, hey, we noticed you are self-publishing. Would you be interested in working with a publisher? And honestly, at first I said, no, I would not, because now I'm like out earning my day job. I'm not going to make that much money with you, especially not from a small press. I'm nothing against small presses. I love them. I think they're great, but usually you don't earn very much money from them. And I was like, no, I got a good thing going here. I'm not giving you a cut of this pie. I did this myself. Take a hike. And one of them was very persistent and kept coming back to me, month after month. And we're like, okay, but like, here's what we could do for you. And here's what else we could do for you. And then I put out this book called Tidewater, which was another historical novel. And somebody at that press read it and was like, we really, really like this book and we want to re-release it. Will you please sell it to us? And here's what the contract looks like. And I was like, okay. I mean, they didn't make me an offer I couldn't refuse, but they made me a compelling enough offer that I was like, I'm willing to try this. We'll see how it goes. So that was how I started working with Lake Union Publishing. I did a few more books with them while I was still self-publishing on the side. In 2017, they decided they wanted to kind of take my work in a more like upmarket literary direction. So they asked me to come up with a new pen name that they could promote, which is how we came up with Olivia Hawker. And from that, my first book as Olivia Hawker was a bestseller. It hit the Washington Post bestseller list. It sold a lot of these. It got optioned for film twice. It never ended up being made into a movie so far, but it was popular. It was a popular book. My second one did even better. My second Olivia Hawker book, which was one for the Blackbird, one for the Crow, was one of the top-selling books in the entire English language global market for all of 2020, out of all genres. So it was really,
Wow.
it was a powerhouse book. Yeah, it was like, oh, okay, I guess I broke out or whatever. So I just took off from there. So after I already had that breakout hit, I went to a conference and I had a manuscript that I had written that my publisher, Lake Union, did not feel was right for them. So I took it to this conference and I pitched it to agents and I said, hey, I'm already a bestseller. Here's what my numbers are like. My last book earned out its advance in pre-orders. It's a big deal. I want to sell this book to somebody in the big five and start competing for major awards. So I found an agent there who was good and who was actually willing to to stick with it and do the work. So that's how I ended up with my agent. I became a bestseller first.
Nice. Nice. So
Yeah.
you started off self-published and they found you. I love that story because I self-publish and I
Yeah.
don't want to go through the pain of sending out hundreds of query letters. So now I'm just going to hope that what happened to you happens to me.
Well, I honestly, I tell people this all the time. I honestly think the smartest thing a modern writer can do is to self-publish at least some of your work, if not all of it. I think self-publishing is the smartest thing you can do as a writer. I think it's crazy to pursue publishers first. I think it doesn't work out well that way for the vast majority of writers. But if you can establish an audience in self-publishing first, you actually have a really good shot of being taken seriously by publishers later. So it gives you negotiating power with publishers. So,
Wow.
And honestly, you will do as much work as a self-publisher as you will with traditional publishing. The excuse I always hear is like, but I just want to write. I don't want to market and do all this other stuff. Bad news, dude. You're going to do all that stuff with a traditional publisher. They don't do diddly squat. It's true. Sorry. So,
but there's some advantage. There must be some advantage to having a traditional publisher, though.
Advances and distribution. Those are the
only distribution.
Those are the two pros I see. It's so little of an advantage that I still consider myself. I haven't put out a self-published book since 2019 and like early 2019 at that, but I still consider myself an indie author because I protect my ability to self-publish in all of my contracts. Like I keep that door open for myself because like I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket, and especially not a basket that's as dumb as traditional publishing. Like it's a dog and pony most of the time there. The exception is Lake Union, the publisher that does my Olivia Hawker stuff. They're awesome, but they're kind of like outside the rest of the publishing environment. They're owned by Amazon, which makes them this kind of outsider status. But it also makes them very data-driven in all the decisions they make, which is also a huge advantage because the rest of the publishing world just goes on vibes, which, as it turns out, is a real stupid way to run a business. So indie authors and Amazon publishing, in my opinion, are the best way to go if you want to build a career as a writer.
Fantastic. That's the best news I've heard in a long time.
Good.
That's what I've been doing. I've got 10 books published on Amazon now.
Good for you. That's awesome.
And more on the way. I'm unstoppable like yourself, but I haven't been at it as long as you have, though.
That's great, though. That's really cool. Are you on a boat? Do you live on a boat?
Yes. This is we're
sweet.
on a boat. Yeah. I live on a
Cool.
sailboat. I'm
Nice.
in Panama right now. I'm at a remote island about 10 miles offshore, um, with Indians, American Indians living on the island, and no
Wow.
modern civilization. The closest modern civilization is probably 40 miles away.
Oh, that's so cool. That's
Yeah,
great. I love
it's
sailing.
it's wonderful. I've been here for 2.5 weeks now on this particular island. Um,
Nice.
no plans to leave anytime. I've got Starlink. I don't have to go anywhere anymore.
You're set, baby. That's cool.
I can interview somebody in British Columbia from Panama. Yeah, I love it. I
I
love the
know.
modern technology. It's fantastic.
Me too. I love living in the future. It's the best.
Yeah, right. All right, I got some questions about writing technique. A lot of your sentences are very descriptive and very well written. So my question is, when you write a long descriptive sentence with similes and metaphors, do they come out that way in the first draft? And if not, can you explain the process of crafting a long, beautiful sentence?
Yeah, typically I try to reserve my long beautiful sentences for where I want the reader to pay closer attention to what I'm doing with the story, whether it's, some detail they need to know for the story to make sense later, whether it's something about character or whatever. I try to pull people into those critical moments within a story via prose. Because otherwise, if you just put it everywhere, then then none of it stands out that way. So you have to use it judiciously, like with a purpose, like a surgeon uses a scalpel. Um, and I find, for me personally, when I'm kind of on a writing jag and when I'm in flow state, it typically comes out more or less the way it's going to be uh, in the finished product. Not always. Like I do have some gooders I work with, and sometimes they flag something and they're like, "This isn't clear. Like I'm not quite sure what this imagery means. It needs some tweaking." And in that case, I'll change it. But usually, it comes out as the finished product, and mainly what I have to work on in my revisions and in edits is like story structure and character development stuff, the stuff that's not pretty prose. I'm pretty good, like pretty prose comes naturally to me, that part's easy for me, the rest of it I have to work at a lot harder.
I wonder if that's the poetry practice coming out.
It probably is. I think it also has a lot to do with what I read. Like I tend to read, I don't really care whether a writer is any good with story. Like I'm there for the prose. It matters to me how well they craft sentences. Like I'm really into Vladimir Nabokov, Hilary Mantel, Ali Smith, Catherine Davis. Like those are my jams. Um, and like, I couldn't, I'm sure other writers are really good at what, but like I'm not there for really cool plots or whatever my
Mhm.
thing. Like I'm there because of prose. So I think because I'm so drawn to it, and because when I do read fiction, I really only read for prose. I think that kind of shows as an influence in my work. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I love that as well, and, I like Cormac McCarthy is one of my favorites,
Yeah.
and, Charles Dickens as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of them. McCarthy really sticks in my head, though, like, I don't read too many books more than once, but I've read Blood Meridian at least 4 times.
Oh, that's a great book. I love Blood Meridian. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the ways I get my head in the right place before writing. I'll often read a few pages of that book before I start writing, um,
Yeah.
and that's why I've read it so many times. That's one reason, just to get my, yeah, it just puts my head in a completely different place, and that's why he's such a good writer. Um, all right, so do you plan your characters? Do you plan your character traits, characterizations ahead of time, or do they develop as you go?
Yeah, I plan everything ahead of time, and I'm the kind of writer who centers theme first. Like my books are, each book is trying to do something in the world. I've got a message for each book. Whether that comes through accurately to readers all the time is a totally different story. But when I write it, I'm very intentionally playing to a particular theme for that book. So I design my characters, my plots, my settings, everything is centered around that theme, and everything is a means of illustrating that theme or different aspects of that theme. So, if I have like one for the blackbird, one for the crow, the theme in that was like how we need to stop being afraid of death and recenter death as like a sacred part of life. So, one character who has trouble confronting the concept of death because of this reason, another who has troubles with death because of some other reason. So I give them all kind of reasons why they're turning away from this theme so I can later show how they have to turn back toward it. So everything for me starts with a theme and then it's built out from there, including the characters. So yeah, I'm very into plotting in advance, making sure everything lines up before I get rolling with it. I know, not everybody writes that way, and that's fine. Like, I'm not saying this is the way to do it. It's just what works for me as what I'm drawn to as a writer.
Hmm. Can you describe the research that goes into a historical fiction?
Yeah, historical fiction is typically very research heavy because the readers, the fans really expect a lot of historical detail and they expect historical accuracy. And if you aren't, like if you deviate from accuracy for the sake of story, you better explain all of that in an author's note or they will destroy you on Goodreads. It's like historical fiction fans, they know their history, man, and you cannot, like, you got to be careful with history when you're doing fiction. So yeah, there's always a lot of research that goes into writing a historical novel. For me, what I tend to do is I research, like, once I know what my setting's going to be. So for example, for October in the Earth, the setting is 1931 during the Great Depression on the rails. It follows the lives of a hobo, a female train hobo, and her friend as they ride freight trains around the United States. So I had to research, the social and political issues that were present in 1931 in the United States. And then once you can feel how your characters will move through that landscape, that's when I stop actively researching and I start writing the actual book. And then as you go along, you hit, oh, what would they have eaten? What would they have worn? What kind of music would they have listened to? Whatever. Those little details that get sprinkled in and that add so much color to historical fiction. You can stop just long enough to research those things. And then as soon as you have the answer to that question, you get back to work because it is so easy to just fall down rabbit holes of research because history is fascinating. It's super fun to learn about all this crazy stuff that happened. And you can spend all your writing time just doing nothing but research. So you have to have a rigid game plan for yourself of like, okay, I got that detail. I got to stop reading about the history of mechanical pencils now or whatever and get back into what I was doing, which is writing this book.
Yeah. And you went on a road trip for October in the Earth, didn't you?
Yeah, kind of. So we were going anyway to a friend's wedding down in Florida, but I was like, hey, we could actually a big part of this route that my characters take on the way back. So we drove back from Florida, like following, like up through Arkansas and following some of these routes I mentioned. So I could get a feel for what the landscape really looked like and how it feels to move through that landscape at speed. It would have been better if I was actually on a train, but we had to settle for driving. But yeah, it was really fun and really cool. I really enjoyed that experience. And my husband was with me. We managed to not want to murder each other after like 18 days in a car together. So that was a miracle.
Yeah.
But yeah, we
That's
had
a
a great
long
time. It was
drive.
really cool. Yeah, it was a very long
Holy
drive. I
cow.
mean, I think the thing that mainly kept us going was that it was a tax write-off, because it was for work.
Yeah. Where in Florida? That's where I'm from.
St. Petersburg.
All right. That's where I bought my first sailboat.
Oh, hey. Yeah, the wedding was at Sunken Gardens. It was beautiful. We had a
All
good time.
right. Yeah. Golly, I've got some memories from there. All right. I've got some highlights from your book that I've highlighted on my Kindle.
Oh, great.
And
Yeah.
I'd like to read them and then ask. Do you have enough time for? Do you have
Oh
a
yeah,
schedule?
I got
Okay.
nothing going on until 7 p.m. today, so I'm good.
All right. Well, I won't take that long. All right. I'm gonna read one of my first highlight here. It's actually kind of long. The black sky, the world, the state of things were all so much bigger than I'd understood them to be, than I'd even thought possible. I lived all my life in a dream where one only needed to call upon the great name if one wished it, if one wished to take hold of the world and master it, proclaim the power over sickness and misfortune, and they would meekly vanish, tell the devil to get out, and the devil would go running. But we'd prayed against the poverty, all of us in the valley, and it had only sunk its talons deeper into the body of our church. We'd proclaimed ourselves untouched by suffering, by drought, by hunger and want, yet there wasn't one of us who didn't suffer, save for Irving and me. And now I understood that we had multiplied the pain Whoops. Now I understood that we had multiplied the pain of our followers by taking what we didn't need. Uh, I highlighted that because it's very powerful, and I'm wondering if that's one of your themes.
Yeah, it was one of the main things I wanted to accomplish with October in the Earth. It has two specific jobs that it's doing. It has two messages and two themes. And one of them was I really wanted people to think about how our current economic and social situations reflect those that we saw during the Great Depression. And how similar things really are right now, even though it feels like it can't possibly be the same crisis because we have, our technology is different, our society is different. But is it really that different? I'm not sure it is. Like, do we still have people using positions of power to exploit the people who are already suffering to further enrich themselves off of that? So yeah, that was definitely one of the key themes in that book for
Yeah.
sure.
Is that also a religious theme?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much always write about religion. I'm not a particularly religious person myself. I'm one of those annoying people who says I'm spiritual but not religious. And then if you ask me what that means, I'm like, I have no idea. So, like I believe in God, but like definitely my concept of God does not resemble any concept of God you will find in any established religion. Like it is so far out there compared to that type of God. So I frequently write about religion, fascinated by the fact that religion is just like a human behavior, like coming up with gods and mythologies to describe and to explain the world and reality is just like what we do. We've done it forever, as far back into history as we can trace humanity. We've had religions of some kind, and I think that's super interesting. So religion is like always present in my writing, and sometimes it's very center stage. What's weird is that October in the Earth is maybe one of my less religious books in some ways, although there is an Easter egg hidden in that book that is religious in nature, but that I've never told anyone about, and I'm curious to see whether any reader ever picks up on it. So
I wonder
we'll
if it's going to
see.
be in one of my. I've got a few more highlights, so
Maybe.
maybe we're gonna crack open the Easter egg here. I don't know. I definitely see religious theme in here, and that one, that one to me obviously speaks about predatory preachers who are living on high on the hog.
Yep. Something I
That
feel very strongly about.
Yeah, I mean some of these folks are getting very rich, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just so obvious a scam. I mean to me, but people
Yep.
fall for it all the time.
They sure
They don't,
do.
they fall for it. All right, next highlight. The first night on the train, my first night of freedom. The days of my youth crowded around me like moaning specters, and I pulled the rucksack onto my lap and pressed my face against the familiar substance of canvas and the things I'd packed inside, but nothing could shut out the vision of my wasted, stolen years. Uh, Again, a very powerful passage there. Um, where does that come from? Is that from your own experience, or how did you come up with such powerful what am I trying to say here? Like that passage draws emotion out of you. Um,
Oh, well, thank you. And just to give listeners a broader context for that passage too. So this character Dell is at this point anyway, still in the book, she's the nice obedient wife of a famous Baptist preacher in Kentucky. And she's been going along with everything that he's been doing in his life and supporting him kind of blindly, because that's what you're supposed to do when you're a nice Christian wife, right? Is support your husband and be a helpmeet. And only when she realizes that he's been not anywhere near the moral man he claims to be, does she kind of like her worldview shatters and she snaps and she jumps on a freight train to get away from him and to start over a new life. So that's her first experience of leaving um, this environment that she's been immersed in since birth, where good women listen to whatever the man in their life says they must do. And it freaks her out. She has a major freak out on that train, like, what am I doing? Reality's falling apart. And even though that wasn't something I drew from my own experience, I grew up Mormon, and and I know a lot of people who had similar experiences when they left Mormonism. So a lot of my ex-Mormon friends describe something very similar, to where they feel like, they feel like part of their life was taken from them by this lie, this thing that cannot possibly be true. And they had a hard time dealing with that. So I was thinking of a lot of my fellow ex-Mormons. Fortunately, my experience of leaving the religion was very easy and very natural for me, and I did not experience trauma like that. But I was drawing on some of, my cousins who have experienced that, my friends who've experienced that. I've talked to a lot of them about what it was like to just suddenly have your whole worldview shatter and just go, well, I can't even exist in this anymore. What do I do? So yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It definitely comes out just like that, and that's the situation Dell was in. All right. Here's another one. Maybe there isn't much difference between fear and rejoicing. Maybe it's all the same wellspring of awe. Maybe we decide whether the water tastes of joy or despair once it's in our mouths and we're already swallowing it down. Uh, Also, is that a theme? Was it planned? And did you think this up while you were writing?
That was that plays a little bit into the other theme of this book, which is another thing that, strangely, very few readers have picked up on. I thought more people would find it more obvious, but at the risk of spoiling some things for any listeners who might want to read October in the Earth, Dell is in love with Louisa, her friend, although she doesn't really recognize this. She certainly never says it. Dell never says, I was in love with Louisa. But the way she talks about Louisa and thinks about Louisa makes it, I thought, makes it obvious to the reader that she is in
It,
love
it,
with her.
it was.
Yeah, thank you. Good. I wanted it to be without her coming right out and saying it. And she also has no idea whether Louisa feels the same way about her in return. And she doesn't see a way to approach the subject. She just tries to hold on to all the experiences she has with Louisa while they are there, which is drawn from a similar experience in my own life with somebody who I love very much and who I never knew whether they felt the same way about me, and had, because of the circumstances of our lives, there was no way to raise this subject without potentially destroying what we had, this friendship that we had, right? And the friendship meant too much to me for me to ruin it by raising the specter of love. So I was just like, I'm just going to accept this for what it is and be grateful for whatever moments I get with this person. So in kind of coming to terms with that experience in my own life, I sort of had to develop that philosophy of like, I can be upset about this, that it's not, that this love is not reciprocated as far as I know, and that there's no way to find out whether it is reciprocated or not. Or I can just choose to be grateful that it's in my life at all, that I have this experience with this other person, and that I get to enjoy their company in whatever capacity I can enjoy it. So that was kind of what informed that passage. And I don't really remember whether it came out like that or whether I had to work on that a little in revisions. I don't know. It's been a while since I wrote it. It's been like over a year, so I couldn't tell
Okay.
you now.
Oh, good enough. Good enough. That was a good description. All right. Here's two short highlights. One's from page 104, and then the other is from page 312. So it's obviously a theme if it happened twice in the book like that. But anyway, here they are. Page 104. If the old world has ended, that just means we're free to make a new world, and we can make it after any pattern we choose. Page 312. The end was nigh all over again. Maybe the world never stops ending. So
Yeah,
similar
and
passages. One seems to be more
yeah.
positive than the other.
It is, yeah, for sure. But that is kind of, that's sort of my life philosophy, I guess you could say, that um I have a curious approach. It's so funny that we're talking about this now, because I actually, before we started recording this, I was recording an episode of my podcast, which is going to come out on November 8th, where I talk about the concept of beginnings and endings, and how you can't really tell where a beginning starts and stops or where an ending starts and stops. They just kind of flow into each other, right? So I think about that concept often, and for whatever reason in my life, and I think it sort of made its way into October in the Earth there, in those particular passages you highlighted, where endings are sort of like, perception is involved in whether something is an opportunity or a setback. It's a often, like, sometimes we feel like something can be the end of everything. Like I felt in that closet with my laptop, when really it's just the start of something new, and there is kind of, if you look at it the right way, there's no difference between a beginning and an ending. It's always, every ending creates
Hmm.
something new out of it. And every time something new is created, it also ends something else. It cuts off pathway of possibility into the future for something else. So it depends on how you look at it. Is it a good yeah, that's my weird philosophy.
I like it. Okay, last one. Love is a excuse me. Love is a thing that's given, not taken. If the love is real, then giving is enough. And I think that appeared in the very beginning of the book too, didn't it? Or something similar?
Yeah, the first line of the book is very similar, and it kind of wraps up again with that same idea at the ending. And yeah, that just kind of harkens back to my idea about this relationship in my own life and how important it is to me, and that you know, if you really love someone, even if they don't reciprocate that feeling, if it is true love, if love is genuine, then it feels the same to give it whether the person reflects it back to you or not. Like, you're going to love that person the same regardless. So does it even matter whether they love you in return? Not from my perspective.
Right. It seems to me that sentence applies both to Irving and to Dell and Irving's relationship, or Irving's relationship with Dell, and then also the way Dell felt about Louisa. So on the
Yeah.
one hand, one was a taker and one was a giver.
Yep.
Well, again, I loved the book, October in the Earth. It's available. Where's it available? Amazon?
Yeah, it's available Amazon. You can also order it through, whatever indie booksellers you like or bookseller of choice. They probably don't have it in stock in their stores. That's kind of the way things go with my career. But if you tell them you want to read it, order it for you, or just buy it on Amazon. I don't care, whatever.
Well, it's an excellent book, and you also, The Wife of the Prophet, is that out or coming out soon?
Yeah,
And
The
did I say the
Prophet's
name
Wife.
right? The
Yeah,
Prophet's Wife.
that's okay. It's called The Prophet's Wife. That one's published under my real name, Libbie Grant. I actually consider that to be my very best book. So if you want to really read what I can do when I have just been unleashed in all my Mormon insanity, go read that one. It's a historical novel based on the founding of the Mormon Church, and it's told through the eyes of Emma Hale Smith, who is the first and only legal wife of notorious polygamist Joseph Smith.
Yeah, that's sure to have some bombshells in it. Um,
Definitely.
I wanna read it. I'm gonna read that one too.
Great. I hope you enjoy it.
I legitimately like your writing. I'm not just saying that because I'm interviewing you.
Oh, thank you.
I wouldn't have read your book. I was worried when it got here 4 days before the interview, but, and I almost said to you, I'll be able to read it if it's any good, but I didn't I didn't wanna say that, but I'll say it now.
Well, you sent me a copy of yours too, which I appreciate. I was not able to redeem it because for some reason it just won't let me in Canada, which is dumb and I don't know. But I'm planning on buying one of your books and checking it out, so I'll read yours as well.
Oh, okay. Well, I've got a bunch of nonfictions too. So you
Oh,
said you're a
cool.
nonfiction reader. I've got a lot of you listen to nonfiction audiobooks, right?
I do.
I've got 2 or 3 or 4 nonfiction audiobooks. So if you see one you like, I can send you a promo copy of it,
Oh, cool.
a free
Sweet.
copy.
Yeah, I'll check that
Yeah,
out.
they're um I mostly write about sailing adventures, things I've done.
I do
And
love sailing, so that sounds great.
oh
My
yeah, are you a
husband used
sailor?
Well, I mean, kinda, not a good one. My husband used to be in the Coast Guard, and when I first started dating him, he was living on a liveaboard, so we had some adventures.
Cool, I bet up around the San Juan Islands. That's a famous sailing location.
Yep, yep. We lived on San Juan Island for quite a while, so yeah.
I have a sailing friend there who lives there, up there somewhere. Andrew Evans is his name, also an author.
Oh, yeah, I know Andrew.
You know Andrew?
I mean,
No
I mean,
way.
not super well. Like everybody on San Juan Island knows each other, and I lived there for eight
Yeah.
years, so yeah, we all know each other.
If you see him again, tell him hi. Tell him hi from
Okay,
Paul. He ought to know who I am.
I
I
will.
mentioned his book, Single Hand Sailing, all the time on I have a sailing podcast as well,
Oh,
and
great.
I recommend that book. At any time if somebody asks me about single hand sailing, which is what I do, I say you've got to read Andrew Evans' book. It's like the Bible. Like he literally wrote like the book on how to sail a boat by yourself.
I have actually read most of Single Hand Sailing because I took sailing lessons from a guy who was like, you have to read this book first. So I read like almost all of it. It is very good. It's very informative and very like clear and makes all the concepts very easy to
Yeah,
understand. So
yeah, if you're gonna sail a boat by yourself, like, you read that book and you think, "Wow, like, okay, like, at least I know how to do it now," you know?
yeah.
Whether or not I can, I don't know, but at least I ought to know what to do if I can remember, certain
Yeah.
situations. Um, I kinda have a philosophy that you can learn anything from a book, if you want to.
Book and a
If you're a
little bit of
book learner.
hands-on practice. It's all you need.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. All right, if you could change the world in one way, what would it be?
Oh man, you're pulling out the hardball questions right at the last.
Bam. Yep.
Um, I would make people, let's see, what if I could change the world in one way, what would it be?
Yeah, it's
Geez,
tough.
that's I feel like I feel obligated to give a deep answer to that. No, I'm just gonna do it. I would make sure people adopt the same philosophy I have adopted, that it is enough to give love even if you don't receive it. That's what I would do.
Oh, wow, that would really make a difference right there.
I think it would. Also,
Yeah.
everyone should probably do mushrooms. You might want to edit that out. I'm fine if you leave it in. I'll leave it up to your discretion as a podcaster.
I'll leave it in. I'll leave it
All
in.
right, fine.
I recently interviewed a guy who said, I think he said it on the podcast, something similar about hallucinogens, how everybody should do psychedelics. He said, you should, I mean, it's
I
not
mean,
not do
yeah.
them all the time, but maybe
No.
once. Yeah.
Usually once is enough, and then you're like, I'm done.
Yeah, I'm done. I did some of that when I was younger, and then I got to a point where I said, okay, I'm never gonna do that again.
Yeah.
I had my
I
I
think
had my fun with it, and I've seen the
I
other
think we all
side.
reach a point where we're like, that's enough. Yeah.
Yeah,
Pulling the
who was
curtain
it?
back closed on reality.
I forgot. I don't know who it was, but somebody said LSD is self-regulating. It was an older hippie who was talking about LSD, but he said it's self-regulating. He's like, it tells you when to stop. It
Yep.
tells you when you've seen the other side enough. You're right. It really is something to see the whole world from a completely different perspective.
Yep. It is.
And to see inside of your mind. I think LSD is more like you see the world differently
And
visually, but
yeah.
mushrooms, you see the inside, you see like the back of your brain that you've never seen before, and it can be
Oh yeah.
scary. I'm losing you. Hold on. Hold that thought. Okay, you're back. Whatever you just said, I didn't get.
Oh, I just said
I'm sure it was a fun answer.
oh yeah, you see all kinds of shit on mushrooms. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it can be anything. Hopefully it's fun. Uh, but for the listeners, no, it can be anything from not fun to fun and in both extremes. So
And
there you
you
have it.
never
There's
know
my
until
warning.
you try.
All right. Well, is there anything else? Where can people find you online?
I am on, let's see, I'm not on Twitter anymore because Twitter crashed and burned. So I'm on Threads, and I'm on Substack. I'm just starting a Substack where I'm going to put some short fiction up there if people enjoy short stories. And I'm on Instagram. So all of my social media handles are the same, at the Libbie Grant. Just make sure you spell my name Libbie, not with a Y. And I hope you will check out my podcast, Future Saint of a New Era, because it's lots of fun.
Awesome. Well, Libby, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's truly been a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you for having me, Paul. It was great talking to you too.